Every evening, he would mention her name as casually as passing the salt, comparing the way she cooked, the way she smiled, the way she existed, until one night I collapsed on the kitchen floor while making dinner, and he simply looked down at me and said she would never have let that happen. In that moment, I realized grief wasn't the only thing living in our marriage, and I had to face a truth I'd been avoiding. If this story speaks to something quiet inside you, you're welcome to like and subscribe for more real-life stories like this. The moment my body gave out on the kitchen floor, I understood how tired I truly was, not just physically, but in a way that reached somewhere much deeper. I had remarried believing this chapter of my life would be gentler, that love the second time around would be quieter, more understanding, but instead I found myself living in the shadow of a woman who was no longer alive. From the first weeks of our marriage, my husband spoke of his late wife as if she were still present, comparing the way I cooked, the way I folded laundry, even the way I laughed, always gently, never cruelly, yet each comparison felt like a small erasure of who I was. I told myself he was grieving, that patience was part of love, especially at our age, when we both carried histories we couldn't undo. I grew up believing that stability mattered more than passion, that being chosen, even imperfectly, was better than being alone, and that belief followed me into this marriage. I tried to adapt, to soften my edges, to learn his routines, hoping that eventually I would feel like a partner rather than a replacement. But slowly, I noticed how careful I had become, measuring my words, avoiding conflict, afraid that expressing hurt would make me seem insecure or ungrateful. That night, I was making dinner, moving slowly, my chest tight, my hands shaking, when the exhaustion overwhelmed me and I collapsed before the stove. I remember the cold tile against my cheek and the sound of his footsteps approaching, and for a brief moment, I felt relief, thinking this might finally make him see how much I was struggling. Instead, he stood there, looking down at me, and said quietly that his first wife never let herself get so overwhelmed, that she had always been stronger. Those words landed heavier than any argument we'd ever had, because they confirmed a fear I had been carrying alone, that no matter how much I gave, I would always be measured against someone I could never compete with. As I lay there catching my breath, I realized I wasn't just tired from cooking or from the day. I was tired from constantly proving my worth, from shrinking myself to fit into a memory that wasn't mine. When I finally stood up, something inside me had shifted, not into anger, but into clarity, and I knew that pretending everything was fine was no longer an option. I didn't yet know what I would do, or how much it would change our lives, but I understood that continuing like this would cost me something I might not get back. After the night I collapsed in the kitchen, nothing felt the same, even though the house looked exactly as it always had. I woke up the next morning with my body aching and my mind strangely clear, replaying his words over and over, not in anger, but with a quiet disbelief that this was the life I had stepped into willingly. He didn't apologize in the way I had hoped. Instead, he explained himself calmly, telling me grief never truly leaves, and that comparisons were unintentional, almost reasonable in his mind. Listening to him, I realized how often I had made room for his pain while slowly shrinking my own, convincing myself that patience was love and silence was strength. Over the following weeks, I paid closer attention, not to what he promised, but to what he did. How often his late wife's memory filled every corner of our conversations, how my needs were always something to be addressed later. One evening, after another quiet dinner where I barely touched my food, I finally spoke, not loudly or dramatically, but with a steadiness that surprised even me, telling him I could no longer live in comparison to a woman who wasn't here, and that loving someone new required letting go, not measuring. He looked at me then, truly looked, and for the first time admitted he had remarried to escape loneliness, not because he was ready to love again. That truth hurt, but it also lifted something heavy from my chest, because it confirmed what my body had been telling me all along. The decision I faced wasn't about saving the marriage at any cost, but about saving myself from disappearing completely. I chose to set a boundary, suggesting counseling and space, knowing full well that he might refuse, and when he did, gently but firmly, I felt an unexpected calm. Packing my things wasn't dramatic. It was slow, deliberate, and filled with moments of grief for the life I hoped we'd have, but also relief that I was finally choosing honesty over endurance. Living alone again was quieter than I remembered, yet each day I felt a little more like myself, rediscovering small joys and rebuilding trust in my own instincts. Looking back now, I don't tell this story with bitterness, but with understanding, knowing that love after loss is complex, but it should never require erasing yourself. Sometimes healing doesn't come from staying and fixing what's broken, but from walking away gently, carrying the lesson that your worth is not measured against anyone who came before you.